which is the best docking station to buy? If you're trying to answer that question, you're likely having a pretty rough time. You've got things like DisplayLink, which is super confusing, compatibility for your MacBook, really unclear, and then you've got things like Thunderbolt 5 coming along, which, I mean, it's just USB-C, right? I've been exactly where you are, so let me help you by answering 10 docking station questions and then showing you what I would consider to be one of the best all-rounders. And I'm going to start off by answering the biggest question first. Is Thunderbolt 5 any different to a regular USB-C connection, and do you really need it? Well, it's not marketing hype, and this WAVLINK 12-in-1 docking station does happen to have it. The difference between USB-C and Thunderbolt 5 is actually pretty astronomical. USB-C is a connector type, and Thunderbolt 5 is a very impressive data protocol. It gives you up to 120 gigabits per second bandwidth, or bi-directional bandwidth of 80 gigabits per second, and then 140 watt charging. Essentially, it's the thing that's going to allow you to run a super high-end setup from a docking station like this. Think triple 4K 144Hz monitors, or even 8K if you've got one of them. And the most important part, it's all going to run off one single Thunderbolt 5 cable. That all being said, do you really need to be paying for Thunderbolt 5? Is it really worth it? And the honest answer for a lot of you is actually no. Most of you would be fine with Thunderbolt 4, but the difference in bandwidth is actually around double. So if you're wondering what is the difference between Thunderbolt 4 and 5, that's your answer. Although you don't need Thunderbolt 5, I do think for future-proofing reasons, it's definitely worth it. As monitor resolutions go up alongside refresh rates, it's just going to give you much more flexibility. The other thing to consider with Thunderbolt 5 is that older docking stations running Thunderbolt 4 or below might actually take as much as 4 of your USB-C ports away from you. That's 2 on your MacBook and 2 on the docking station. So in my opinion, paying for Thunderbolt 5 over Thunderbolt 4 is definitely worth it. Off the back of that Thunderbolt question, does the cable that you're using really matter? And the answer is almost certainly yes. And you need to be really careful here. When looking at some of the cheaper models of docking stations, a lot of them won't actually include the cable that you need to get those max speeds. So people are plugging them in and realizing that they can't even work with it. Thankfully, this WAVLINK docking station does come with the exact Thunderbolt 5 cable that you need to get those maximum speeds. So I'll put a link to this in the pinned comment and the description, along with any discount codes that I can find. But do stick around for the compatibility section, because this might not actually be the best docking station for everyone. My third big question, if you're in the market for a docking station, is what is DisplayLink and do you need it? And I know people are going to come for me for this, but I really don't like it. I only use it when it's absolutely necessary. That being said, DisplayLink can be brilliant when you need to work around Mac display limits, but it is still a software-based display solution. So that means that it compresses your image and it can add extra weirdness. And on a Mac, there are even protected content issues where streaming apps may even show a black screen. So it's definitely better to get a docking station that supports those native 4K or even 6K resolutions, rather than relying on a docking station that needs DisplayLink. And that leads me very nicely into the compatibility section. Why is my MacBook not connecting to multiple displays? It's meant to be plug and play, right? Well, off the back of the DisplayLink point, you do need to be really careful here. Most docking stations I've seen will support native 4K resolutions with a MacBook M4 and above without the need for DisplayLink. Anything below an M4, you need to be really careful, and this stuff is usually buried in the small print. WAVLINK, my example docking station here, have been very good about this. They put a big notice up. You can see clearly that Thunderbolt 4 is going to limit you because it simply doesn't have the bandwidth to support the high refresh rates and resolutions of monitors, which is why I say getting a docking station like this with Thunderbolt 5 is worth it and does give you more options. Also, whilst you're here, if you are enjoying the video and you found it helpful so far, do consider subscribing and also consider becoming a channel member to get yourself a fancy badge in the comment section. Hopefully I've answered your big questions about MacBook compatibility and docking stations, but my next big question, do these docking stations work with Windows PCs and can you connect them to a desktop? And the answer is absolutely yes. In fact, they probably work even better with a desktop Windows PC than they do on a MacBook. This particular one here will actually output 4K resolutions to triple monitors running at 144Hz, so long as you have that all-important Thunderbolt 5 port on your PC. And this goes for everything. You really need to check the ports that you've got on your laptop, PC or MacBook, because that is going to be what decides how far you can push these docking stations and which one is ultimately best for you. Anyway, moving on, if you've done any kind of research into docking stations, you will have seen several stories about docking stations getting really hot and possibly even overheating. So is your docking station going to overheat? The short, honest answer is Probably yes, but there's a difference between overheating and getting really hot. I've tried several different docking stations over the years at different price points, and all of them have got really hot, but only some of them have overheated. And there is a pattern. It's usually the cheaper docking stations around the $100 mark that tend to overheat, throttle, and even sometimes shut down for as much as 30 minutes. This one I really like because it's made out of metal, not cheap plastics. It does get hot to the touch, but it never throttles the performance. So just something to be really careful with when you're picking your docking station. Make sure whatever docking station that you pick has got fans or some sort of thermal control built in. The next thing you might want to know is, will your docking station charge your laptop, and is it okay to leave it plugged in? For most docking stations, the answer is yes, you can charge via that very same cable, but not all docking stations support top charging speeds. This again is where Thunderbolt 5 comes in really handy. This example docking station again happens to reach 140 watt charging, which is actually the maximum charging speed of my M4 Pro. So that's another thing that you need to look out for. That being said, we do need to address the elephant in the room here, and this is a bonus question. Does leaving your laptop plugged into a docking station and charging all the time actually damage it? And the answer to that is actually no. Most modern laptops actually have battery protection features built into them, so just make sure that your charging is capped at, say, 80% to stop any battery degradation. Anyway, my next big question is one that's close to my heart, and that is, can you edit 4K directly from an SSD that's plugged into a docking station? The answer is of course yes, and it's actually one of the better reasons to buy a proper Thunderbolt docking station instead of a cheap USB-C hub. As an example, for the WAVLINK dock here, you've got downstream Thunderbolt 5 ports rated up to 80 gigabits plus 10 gigabits USB-A ports. So for normal 4K editing, external SSD work, footage transfers, and even editing directly from a drive, it should be more than enough. I will just put in a quick disclaimer here though, it will depend on the speed of your SSD, the cable, the ports, and how many other high bandwidth things you've got running at the same time. So if you are editing massive 8K multicam projects, plug it into one of the Thunderbolt ports. Don't treat every single port as equal. Anyway, now for the big question, how much should you be spending on a docking station? And interestingly, docking stations sit in this massive range between as little as $40 all the way up to $700 and up. And this docking station is actually not one of the cheaper ones. It sits on the higher end of the midsection, around $300 to $400 depending on discounts. Occasionally it will slip below $300 too, so do check the pinned comment and the description for any discount codes. If it wasn't clear by now, my opinion is spend more now on a docking station to save a headache later. Pretty much all of the cheaper docking stations that I've tested through my time as being a tech reviewer have all failed me, or they've had issues like overheating and then shut down in the middle of me working. So it really does pay off to spend more now. Docking stations are not the sort of thing that you want to be constantly swapping out and messing around with cables, so it is worth investing in them to save on a headache later. If I was buying a docking station again now, this would be my checklist. Look out for a really great port selection, one cable setup so you're not wasting any of those slots on your laptop, and ideally support for high refresh rates and resolution. You honestly want to be avoiding that DisplayLink caveat as much as possible. Off the back of all that, there is one more question we need to answer, and that is simply, is a docking station gonna damage your PC or laptop over time? It's unfortunately quite a commonly asked question, and it's exactly why I back my earlier point about spending a little bit more now to save yourself later. A lot of the mid to high-end docking stations have got really good internal fail-safes to protect against things like power surges, but the lower-end docking stations don't have this sort of stuff. So if you do really cheap out on a docking station, you might actually end up damaging your PC. So again, I reiterate, do invest in a good docking station just to save yourself a headache later. Now, if you've been paying attention, you've probably got a good idea of which docking station that I'm going to recommend, and it is this 12-in-1 WAVLINK docking station. It's exactly why I picked it for this buying guide video. But to break it down for you into 5 points, first, it's got that Thunderbolt 5 port, which we all know we don't need, but does future-proof your setup and avoids headaches. And then 2, we've got an above average port selection, including a 2.5 gigabits network port there, which is better than the standard 1 gigabits a lot of other docking stations come with. 3, it's got maximum charging speeds over one cable for most modern laptops. In my case, my M4 Pro tops out at 140 watts, which is the exact speed of this docking station. And then 4, you're not forced to use DisplayLink. You get maximum resolution and refresh rate as long as you've got a modern PC, again all over one cable. And number 5, which actually goes off off menu is actually the design. Usually docking stations look plastically and extremely boring. This one's got a little bit of character to it and actually feels like a premium accessory that I really want to show off on my desk. My only 3 very tiny downsides to this docking station is 1, I would have loved to have seen a 10 gigabit network port so I can edit directly off my NAS. 2, there's no DisplayPort or HDMI ports on this docking station, which is fine if you've got a newer setup that can make use of that Thunderbolt 5 cable. However, if you've got older monitors like me, you will need a HDMI to Thunderbolt 5 cable, and I'll leave the exact ones that I've been using in the pinned comment and the description for you. And 3rd is that it is not a KVM switch. I use both a Windows PC and a MacBook Pro. It would have been great to make use of the same keyboard and mouse and not have to unplug and plug cables in when I want to switch between the two, but admittedly that is a very niche use case, and I did actually review a KVM docking station in the top left corner a couple of months ago, so go and check that out and I'll see you over there.